Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning. In 1991, Eric Clapton and Will Jennings wrote a song called Tears in Heaven. If you remember that song, it did quite well, reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. And it was the product of Eric Clapton's son dying at a very young age. And I remember one of the lyrics in the song was, "If I met him in heaven, would he know my name?" And you could feel the heartbreak in those lyrics. So today's question really isn't so much about what will bring you healing. The question today before us that I'd like to explore for the next few minutes is, what do we do while we're waiting for the healing to come? At the end of the story of Noah and the flood, Noah emerges from the ark and Noah breaks out into a one-sentence song. He breaks out into a song that's just a few words. Od kol yimei haaretz zera v'katzir, v'kor v'cham, v'kayetz v'choref, v'yom v'layla lo yishbotu. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. It's just a beautiful little poem about the idea that Noah says the world continues on even after such a horrible event as the flood. Yes, the sun will rise, the seasons will continue to come and go. Life hasn't ended entirely. It's a one-sentence poem, a song, if you will. And that, in and of itself, would make a great sermon. That after every significant moment of turmoil in our life, wouldn't it be great if we could put a dot at the end and sing a song, open up our hearts and find the poem? Wouldn't it be great if that was the message of every poem, every song that exists in the Torah? Moses, at the end of his life, after the turmoil of leading the Jewish people through the desert experience, Moses, after the twists and turns, the challenges and the difficulties that the stiff-necked people had given him, breaks out into song, Ha'azinu ha'shamayim ve'adabera ve'tishma aretzim refi. The world takes note of the greatness of the Almighty. After the turmoil of his leadership, after the ups and downs of his journey, after bringing the Jewish people from slavery to the brink of their own promised land, Moses breaks out into song. And we saw that earlier in Moses' life, the song at the sea. Az yashir Moshe uvnei Israel tashira azot ladonai v'yamru lemor. The Jewish people sang to the Almighty, led by Moses and Miriam, after they saw the turmoil of the exodus from Egypt, the chaos of that moment that resulted in the Egyptian army being drowned in the sea. They broke out into song. That in and of itself would be a wonderful sermon for us this morning, and that is, wouldn't it be great if we could know the moment when the turmoil ends, and then we break out into song, being able to celebrate our achievement of survival? But that would be somewhat naive, to think that the moment you are running for your life, and then the next moment, you're dancing in victory. Or to think that after all Moses had been through in the desert with this stiff-necked people, and then prohibited from entering the land of Israel, that Moses would be simply okay with it and accept his fate. But that's not how each of those stories end, you see. Noah, after he sings his song, after he writes his poem, he plants a vineyard and he gets drunk, as if drinking might solve the problem of the residual trauma that he must have been feeling when he walked out of the ark and saw the decimation? Or is it possible the same thing at the Song of the Sea, in which the Jewish people turn around and they see the devastation even of their enemy and they sing? But we know that the turbulence for the Jewish people at that moment was not the conclusion, but just the beginning of the challenges they would face for the next 40 years in the desert. And as if Moses' song of Ha'azinu was the very last sentence in the Torah, it wasn't. There were 2 more chapters to go. The truth is, we don't have an on and off switch on our emotions in which we can say, now I'm no longer sad, here I am now happy. We don't have an on and off switch. We're simply not wired that way. The point is simple. What are we going to do while we're waiting for recovery to come? In all 3 of these moments, the answer is very simple. Find a creative outlet. For all 3 of these moments in the Torah, the conclusion isn't the song. It's just the expression of where they were at that moment. Creativity is a way to express ourselves. And some write a song, and some compose a poem. I don't know if you remember when you were children, or if when you had children, you'd go on a long trip. And along the way, the child would often ask the question, are we there yet? An adult responds with a variety of distractions. See if you can get a truck to honk its horn. See how many different license plates you can see from different states. Some play word games, but it's all what we did in order to pass the time until we got there. And sometimes it meant learning, and sometimes it just simply was an activity. It made the time pass. As adults, when we go on long trips, maybe on airplanes, we watch movies, we listen to music, we read a book. It's what we do while we're waiting till we get there. When we're not feeling well, maybe we've had a procedure, maybe we just hurt ourselves. We go to the doctor and we ask, how long can we expect the hurt to go on? Or when can I resume activity? Either way, we all want to know how long it's going to take until we recover. So many times the doctor responds with a specific time frame that comes from experience. And when that time frame passes and we still don't feel well, we call the doctor's office, and their response is that everybody heals differently. They're giving their experience, but everyone heals differently. When Moses went up the mountain and came back later than the Jewish people had anticipated, the Jewish people built the golden calf. When the people saw that Moses was long coming down, Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe laredet minahar, when they got nervous, they had a moment of creativity and expression, and they built a golden calf. In fear, they also engaged in a moment of creativity. What could they do while they were waiting for Moses to return? They built an idol. No doubt it was a sin against which all other transgressions of the desert were measured. But can we really blame them? They were suffering and they needed to do something. Which brings us back to this week's Torah reading. Twice in this morning's reading, there is a 7-day waiting period. Vayihi l'shivat hayamim umei hamabul haya la'aretz. When Noah had finished building the ark, God said in 7 days, the world will be flooded. And then at the very end of the story, Vayishlach et ha'orev, vayetze yatso v'shov ad yoveshet hamayim me'al ha'aretz. The rain had stopped. So Noah sends out a raven. And then there is a 7-day period until Noah sends out a dove to find actual dry land. He waited another 7 days. Vayichal od shivat yamim achirim. He waited another 7 days. And the comment of the Gemara of the Talmud is eye-opening in that moment. Vayihi lishivat hayamim umei amabul hayal haaretz ma tivam shel shivat hayamim. The Talmud asks the question, what is the nature of those 7 days? Amar Rav elu yemei avelut. Those were the days of sitting Shiva. Those were the days of mourning. He says after seeing the destruction, the loss of life, there requires a Shiva period. The Gemara tells us so beautifully that in moments of destruction and loss in our lives, we need to take time to process, and our tradition calls that Shiva. Understanding their vulnerability of leaving the cocoon of the ark, they needed just a little bit more time, because otherwise the trauma would have been devastating. And then the Gemara says something even more beautiful in that moment. L'lamedecha shehespadam shel tzadikim me'achvim al et haparunot lavo. And that's to teach us that the eulogies of the righteous prevent calamities from ensuing. I think this is such a beautiful comment. What do we do in the moment of death? While we prepare for a life without that person, we write their eulogies. Says the Gemara, writing the eulogy is in fact our creative response to death and destruction, to loss and survival. Rav teaches that we need to write eulogies. We've got to write something down so that we can make sense of the moment. It's the way we process what that person meant in our lives. No doubt, Noah comes out of the ark, sees the destruction, and he gets drunk. Because guess what? His song, his poem, wasn't the middle of the process, wasn't the end of the process, it was simply the middle. Maybe Shiva works for some. Maybe some people just need more time than Shiva. For some, mourning can take place in its entirety in 3 days, some in 7, some in 30, some in a year, and some in 30 years. We all grieve in our own way and in our own time. The question that I pose today is, what do you do while you're waiting for healing to come? Some will build new lives. Some will create, and some will just continue to live. On February 14th, 2015, there was an episode of Doctor Who. I don't know if any of you ever watched Doctor Who. The Doctor and Amy Pond bring Vincent van Gogh to the present in this episode, and they take Van Gogh to an exhibition at the Museum d'Orsay. And they enter the exhibition, and Vincent looks around in wonder. The walls feature many of his most famous works, beautifully framed and admired by onlookers. The Doctor raises his arms as if to say, there you are. Admiration, success. And he turns to the art curator, Dr. Black, who is conservatively dressed and sporting a bow tie, and asks, I just wonder, between you and me, in 100 words, where do you think Van Gogh rates in the history of art? And Dr. Black responds, big question. But to me, Van Gogh is the finest painter of them all. Certainly the most popular great painter of all time, the most beloved, his command of color, the most magnificent. He transformed the pain of his tormented life into ecstatic beauty. Pain is easy to portray, but to use your passion and pain to portray the ecstasy and the joy and the magnificence of our world, no one has ever done that before. Perhaps no one will ever do it again. To my mind, that strange, wild man roamed the fields of Provence, was not only the world's greatest artist, but also the greatest of men who ever lived. The question for us today isn't why do bad things happen to good people? The question is, what do we do when bad things happen? A woman with breast cancer becomes a spokesperson for raising awareness for cancer. A person whose father is suffering from Alzheimer's starts a walk to raise money for scientific research. A spouse of someone with MS forms a political action committee to lobby Congress for more funding. A person whose friend was gunned down participates in a rally to end gun violence. We're all motivated by that which is close to us. And believe me, we all have challenges. We all have difficulties. So I ask you now, just pick your cause. Pick your medium of expression while you wait for some relief. Shabbat Shalom. We continue on page 184, the Chatzi Kaddish. Please rise.